Marco,
Sean,
I saw you in a shirt the other day.
in a shirt
In a shirt,
was
and
the
on the back
same one, the
it
black one that I
was a
usually.
black one, and it had all of your ingredients printed on the back, all the things you're made of. And I won't disclose all the things that are inside you, but let's just say there's probably some
Wait, you're
wine.
talking about the ingredient of what the shirt was made of, or what I am made of? Because that's kind
I
of
think it was
wordy.
I think it was what you were made of, but
Oh my
that's
God. Okay, I don't want to know.
yeah. No, we won't go there. There's plenty of wine anyway. But no, I think if you do look at the shirt though, interestingly enough, you might care about what you put on your back and how it feels and if it's leaving any residue. I used to buy shirts that were from Hawaii and they were made in the red mud from Hawaii, and I had an unnatural tan after wearing, wearing those shirts. Granted, they disclosed what were in them, but I didn't care. But the point is, sometimes you don't know what's in them, and you may not see the residue that's being left behind, and that lack of transparency can put you at risk if you're not
See,
aware of
you
it.
went with the t-shirts. I would have
Huh?
gone, being Italian, I would have gone with food.
Well,
But
food side, I love
but
food
it's
too.
still like a pretty wide approach to cybersecurity, which was we're talking about here, right?
I know
Is that where you're
people
trying to go?
people are trying to figure out what the heck I'm talking about. Yes, yeah, I think ultimately we're talking about what is our business made of, and sometimes consumers of the business care what the business is made of, especially if they're partners with the business. And the only way to know that is through some transparency and visibility into supply chain and all the things that we're using, from physical to digital elements, and perhaps even partners in the things that make up their businesses. So I'm thrilled to have Theresa Lanowitz on from LevelBlue again. We're going to talk about this topic in the context of the futures report that LevelBlue puts together every year. And Theresa, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Sean. It's great to be here with you and with Marco as well.
Yeah. So what do you think about this metaphor? Let's start with that because I'm
I
curious.
think it's a really, really interesting metaphor, especially Sean. You were talking about how you had a shirt dyed with the red dye with the red mud from Hawaii, and you had, I'm assuming you probably, sweat a little bit, and the the dye transferred to your skin. I would love to see what the ingredients were on the back of Marco's shirt.
I think some people want to see that. Yeah,
Probably
that's for
wine
sure.
and coffee mostly.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had other shirts, by the way, that were made from natural ingredients, quote unquote, that were blue and greenish and left hues of those colors on the skin too. So I think I need to change my selection of shirt. Uh, but nonetheless, decisions need to be made. Sometimes you care, sometimes you don't. As a business, oftentimes we don't have the luxury of not caring. We're told we have to care, either by a government entity or our customers or our partners. And yes, we're going to get into what that looks like because it can be pretty challenging. And I know the U.S. government's trying to help with some of that with the CMMC, and I think Europe has probably a better handle on transparency and visibility in this space. But doesn't mean it's easy just because people are thinking about it. But Teresa, quickly, for those who haven't met you, let's have a quick moment to share a few words about who you are, what you're up to at Level Blue these days, and then we'll get into the futures report and a nice overview of that as well.
Absolutely. So my name is Theresa Lanowitz, and I'm Chief Evangelist with LevelBlue. And one of the things that I do at LevelBlue is I lead our thought leadership and research program. And every year we publish, as you mentioned, the Futures Report. The Futures Report is our flagship product or our flagship piece of thought leadership research that comes out every year. And what we do then over the course of the year is we take all of that data that we collect for the Futures Report and create these smaller, more focused types of research reports that you see come out. And also, for those of your listeners who may not be familiar with Level Blue, our real goal is to simplify cybersecurity. And we're on a mission to be a strategic extension of your team, and we do that in three ways. First, we help you to protect your security investment through managed security services. Number two, we help you to be able to predict your business intelligence through our cybersecurity consulting services. And number three, We really help you to be able to foster innovation and mitigate risk through our threat intelligence team.
Yeah, and it's an interesting balance between those last two, right? Managing risk and driving innovation, because one potentially could drive the other up. So the more you
Right, and
innovate, the
that's
more
where everybody
exposure you
wants to go,
introduce.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
innovation is key, and speed is key too. That's one of the things that we've seen, over the past decade, since software development tools have become much more accessible, far easier to use. We have great tools throughout the whole software development lifecycle, all the way from ideation to requirements to coding to managing the pipeline, testing along the way, performance testing, functional testing. Security tools are incredible. So everything has gotten so much better in terms of the tooling that we use. So that's enabled the process to speed up a little bit as well, or actually a lot in most cases.
Yeah, so let's talk about, and we've talked about this in the past, a different segment of the research, but in this particular case, we're talking about the supply chain, and we're not looking at T-shirts, although, yeah, maybe they're part of that. Why is becoming so important for, of course, everybody to have access to the transparency related to knowing where the software comes from and how the company operates, what the security level is, and if there is something in particular that stuck to you in terms of numbers that came out from this report?
Great points. And let me take that in two parts. So, first, let's think about why the software supply chain is so important right now. Why is it a topic of conversation? And then I'll give you some startling facts that we identified in this piece of research. So, if we take a look at the zeitgeist of 2025, we have major US financial corporations calling on their third party software suppliers to say, let's value security over features, over speed to market. So let's make sure that we're leading with this security first mindset. So that's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of why the software supply chain is such a topical event, is that we're living in the API economy. Nobody is doing all of their own software development on their own. Everybody is interfacing with an API, whether it be through your banking institutions, through your day-to-day lives in terms of retail, in terms of ordering food, ordering groceries, that sort of thing, and even in terms of signing into other sites, signing in through a common email application that everybody uses, or signing in through social media sites that everybody uses. So we're living in this idea of the API economy to make the transference, the collaboration of information and data so much easier. And then the third big thing is, I mentioned that nobody is building software all on their own. So you think about where you're getting your software that is running your business. Some of it, you may be getting snippets of code from open source repositories. You may be working with a trusted third-party advisor that you've worked with for years inside of your organization, and they're developing software for you. You may be getting some bit of software, commercial off-the-shelf software that you use and you integrate with that commercial off-the-shelf software. You're probably also developing some of your own software. There may be legacy code that you're bringing in or new source code that you're bringing in. So, and you're bringing in this software from all of these different places. And then, Marco, you alluded to it. We have these government regulations that are coming about saying, hey, we need to know what your software supply chain looks like. We want a software bill of materials, meaning we want an inventory of all of those software artifacts that you're using that we then are using in our software supply chain. And then you take a look at that, and there's just this global awareness. We've seen some high profile attacks over the past couple, 3 months, most notably in the retail industry, moving into transportation industry and hospitality industry. So we've seen all of these different types of attacks, and everything has just come to the point now where software is the last mile. That fast-paced development, that fast-paced business world, you want to make sure that your software is ready to be able to go and be used by any of your partners and also to run your business. But you also want to make sure that it is secure. So then you take a look at that and you say, wow, I have all of this stuff coming from all of these different places. There are so many people, so many entities, including AI generated type of software that we might be pulling into our applications that we're building as well. So we have all of this software coming from disparate places, touched by so many in-person developers as well as AI type of developers as well. And you say, well, how do I really get a handle on this? I have to have some visibility into what's going on. And this is the second part of the question that you asked, Marco. What were some of the startling numbers that we found? We found that 80% of organizations with low visibility into their software supply chain, meaning they don't have that codified inventory or list of software components that's running all of their software. They don't know where that software came from. They don't know if it's come from open source. They don't know if it's come from something that's been internally developed. But 80% of organizations with low visibility into their software supply chain experienced a breach in the past 12 months. And then we take a look at the flip side of that. And if you have low visibility, 80% had low visibility, and they had breaches in the past 12 months. What we also found out is that 6% of organizations said they had high visibility, and they only 6% had a breach in the past 12 months. So you're far more likely to experience a breach if you have low visibility in your software supply chain than if you have high visibility. So 80% of organizations with low visibility had a breach in the past 12 months. 6% of organizations with high visibility had a breach. So the higher your visibility, the less likely you are to have a breach. And that translates into the business use case of we want to keep our systems operational because software runs the business.
So it's a direct business, let's say, a business risk reducer in a way.
Absolutely.
The
It is a direct
correlation
business.
is that
Yeah.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is that simple. And that's the very first thing we talk about in this bit of research is if you have low visibility, you're far more likely to experience a breach. We also go into a lot more detail talking about, the lower your visibility is, the riskier things such as open source software become, unsupported software, legacy systems, the riskier that becomes. So the higher your visibility, the more you know what's going on inside of your software supply chain, the better off you are. And that also translates to you then, as the owner of that software supply chain, you have to go out and work with your third party providers and say, what are your security protocols? What are your security credentials? You can't just say, oh, this is a trusted third party provider that we've been working with. And of course, their software is secure. You never know where a vulnerability may exist. So you have to know your vulnerabilities. You have to be able to understand where those vulnerabilities live inside of that software that you're bringing in to run your business.
Yeah, and visibility, I mean, patches have been a thing forever, right?
Yeah.
Visibility and awareness of what the weaknesses are doesn't mean you're going to close all those holes and plug all those gaps and patch all those vulnerabilities. It could also mean that you mitigate around or find other mitigating controls and ways to reduce that risk. Either change a partner or change how they connect or change the types of data or amounts of data. And as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking within the business. So a lot of what we talk about in ITSP Magazine is security, obviously, with technology underneath it all, which says CISO and CTO or CIO. But who owns supply chain visibility and security? Because I think
Well,
the report found something that a role that I didn't even mention yet has the highest awareness of this problem.
yeah, so let's start there. That's actually a very intriguing point that you bring up because I was really surprised when the data came back as well. The CEO has the best visibility and understanding of the software supply chain and the risk that it brings. And you kind of have to scratch your head and say, why in the world would the CEO be far more attuned to what's going on with the software supply chain? Far more so than the CIO who manages the business of software inside of an organization, far more so than other C-level executives inside of an organization. The CEO has the greatest awareness of the risk of the software supply chain. And if you look at the role of the CEO has a broader view into the overall risk that is going on inside of the organization. Because many of the things that you just mentioned, Sean, such as being able to mitigate around some of the vulnerabilities that may exist in source code, or being able to change the way data structures are used or how data is stored, that sort of thing. Those come down to technical aspects, and there are other risk factors involved in a business aside from its software. So the CEO has a really great broad understanding of what's going on with risk. What is the risk appetite? What can they afford to say, if something happens, here's what it's going to do to our brand reputation, to our stock price, to the way our shareholders perceive us, that sort of thing. So the CEO is a player I don't think anybody would have expected to say, who has the best visibility of the software supply chain? It's the CEO. Not saying that the CEO is sitting there saying, okay, I know this piece of software came from open source. I know this was AI generated, but the CEO understands the implication of the risk of the software supply chain.
I'm going to make a point here because I always think about cybersecurity as a culture and not a code, right? It kind of make me think, because of this large overview, the repercussion on the brand, the repercussion with the partners and the customers. I think we just go there, like the understanding of the complexity of what you have in front. It gives you that kind of different approach to how you look at things. And you don't need to know what is in the code, but you do know that that's a risky behavior.
Absolutely correct. You don't need to know what is in the code from the technical side of things, but from the cultural side of things, you understand where the risky behaviors might be. And you bring up such a great point about cybersecurity being a culture. And this is one of the things that we uncovered in our futures report, our flagship research that we published earlier this year. One of the things we uncovered is that the more organizations, the organizations that we see that have better alignment between the cybersecurity team and the line of business, they are far less likely to suffer breaches. They're able to budget earlier in a cycle of a new project for cybersecurity because they're building cybersecurity in at the beginning. And this is one of the things that we're seeing organizations, especially in financial services, call for, saying you need to build security in from the beginning. It's not an afterthought. You can't wait until you suffer a breach to start to think about cybersecurity. So the more you're aligned, the more the cybersecurity team is aligned with the line of business, the better communication the cybersecurity team has and understands the critical few objectives of the business every year. They know what the business is prioritizing. Whereas if the cybersecurity team is not aligned with the line of business, the cybersecurity team may say, well, let's think about implementing these controls this year, or let's think about, cleaning up some practices maybe over in this other area. And there's no alignment with the line of business and also where the innovation is occurring. So aligning with the line of business is one of the things that we see as extremely critical, and to have that cybersecurity culture built throughout the organization. One of the things we learned in our futures report research is that organizations who say all leadership roles have a cybersecurity responsibility with attached KPIs and metrics. That doesn't matter if you are in the finance team, the HR team, on the product side, on the marketing side, you have a responsibility for cybersecurity within your domain. And the types of organizations who say, yes, we can actually assign some metrics to that and make sure that everybody understands they're responsible for cybersecurity goes back to your point, Marco, of the culture of cybersecurity coming into an organization. So that plays out exceptionally well.
I'm going to throw you a doozy here, Theresa, because that's what I like to do. So I'm going to connect the point on everything. It's an API economy. There's a lot of open source, and even if you think you're using a trusted third party, chances are they're using API services and open source as well. So it continues down the chain. And I think when I look back over time, the build by partner decision has gone from big monolithic projects down to we need this feature, or we need this small agent, or we need this web page that has this functionality on it now. And each of those is now built by a partner. Can we find a piece of software? Can we leverage an API? Can we reuse some other code that we have? Do we just grab something from GitHub? And I think when organizations are building these things, the ones with more resources perhaps take more time to find more secure options, more resilient options, if I want to say that. And maybe some other organizations, perhaps even in other regions, because I think the report speaks to, where was it? The APAC and Latin America regions, perhaps, build software differently and therefore use more open source and other services to build the solutions that they're pulling together. So I guess with all that said, the question to you is, how does the maturity or size of an organization, if you have any insights into that, change the way they look at this problem, change the way that they tackle mitigating some of this risk?
Really, really interesting point, because what you started to really kind of go down the path of there is we're not just talking about third party, we're talking about fourth party or the nth party. So, as you said, I'm working with a trusted provider that I've been working with for years, but they're also going out and getting some of their source code through open source repositories, or maybe they're contracting with somebody else to write some snippets of code, that sort of thing. So it's not just third party, it goes to the fourth party, fifth party, and so on, all the way down the supply chain. So looking at that nth party. What we also found out looking at regional differences, and this is highlighted exceptionally well inside of our research, we broke the regions out by North America, Europe, Latin America, and APAC. And what we found is that across the world, and this is one of the things that's quite shocking, is that across the world, software supply chain has very low visibility. So it's something that every region of the world can actually take advantage of and say, we need to be better on the software supply chain. We need to really start working with our third party suppliers, understanding what's in our source code, that sort of thing. And then what we also found out is that across the world, across the world globally, people are saying, yes, it's highly likely that we're going to have an attack on our software supply chain. And then they say, yes, we're investing in it. But the thing that really struck me as odd is they say, we have low visibility. We know we're likely to be attacked through our software supply chain. We're investing in software supply chain security. However, we're not working with our third-party suppliers. And that just strikes me as odd in terms of they're saying, yes, we're going to invest in it, but we haven't really begun to examine the security credentials of our third-party suppliers and their suppliers throughout that whole software supply chain. And that's a global phenomenon. And there are some regions that are doing a little bit better, but across the board, that's kind of the story that plays out with the data that we collected around this whole idea of the software supply chain and the readiness across different regions of the world.
Is there a financial reason why they are not moving in that direction, even if they do know that that's one of the reasons why they get breached and cybersecurity risk?
I think one of the things that we see is, so they know that their visibility is low, and you both come from a development background. The idea of building software is tremendously difficult. And so the software developers are saying, yes, we know we have to do better on this. The people that own the software are saying, we know we have to do better on this, but it just hasn't really been a priority. So what we see happening now is we have this perfect moment because the CEO, the top person in the organization, has awareness of the criticality of the software supply chain. And what we're also seeing is that we've seen recent cyber adversarial gangs really executing against the software supply chain, getting into organizations through social engineering tactics, and then attacking the software supply chain. We've seen a lot of attacks like that in 2025. So there's this perfect moment now for organizations to really rally around this need to secure the software supply chain, because the CEO is saying, yes, I understand this as a risk, and we see these attacks coming. So to be proactive and to be able to defend your organization against software supply chain attacks, the investment is happening. Around the world, people are saying, yes, the investment is happening, but they haven't necessarily figured out the right way to go out. And this is at a large scale. They haven't necessarily figured out the right way to go out and figure out through their third-party suppliers and their fourth-party suppliers and so on, what the software credentials are, how organizations are really making sure that inside their own organization, those third-party suppliers are building with a security-first mindset. And this is the opportunity that's out there for companies of every type right now.
And I may be wrong, but I'm thinking also technology is probably helping more now. AI, data in general, and information sharing. Because if one company look into one supplier, then there is information sharing. That supplier is kind of vetted for other companies as well. So it's almost like it needs to reach that tipping point. That maybe that's why now you say is the right time to do it.
Yes, it's the ability to be able to assign confidence to that particular supplier, but also some of the technology that organizations are investing in when they say they want to do better in the software supply chain. They're looking at more threat detection and response. They're looking at exposure management, making sure that they're understanding where their vulnerabilities are in their source code. So that comes back to this idea of good software engineering practices. And I think one of the things we've seen over the past decade and a half is that we have defined speed to market being the quintessential event that we have to create every time we have new software coming out. Speed to market, because we can always go back and fix it. It's software. But now, because the adversaries are so determined, we're saying, we need to lead with a security first mindset. So I think we're, as I said, we're kind of at this perfect point right now where the CEOs are exceptionally aware of this. The software tooling is so good. Third-party suppliers are willing to work with the customers that they have, and there's a lot more in terms of popular APIs that organizations are running. So those companies that are selling the APIs, that are providing the APIs that are common, they have a higher standard, I think, that they're going to be held to as well.
So the CEO's aware. There's some investment, I guess, suggesting that CIOs and CISOs are trying to figure out how to answer the CEO's questions around this. and,
Yeah.
and in there's some gap, right?
Yeah.
We know there's risk. We need to figure out how to describe it and quantify it for the CEO. And I think there may be a few gaps you might want to highlight, and also perhaps now's a good time to point out that you in the report you offer some guidance for how to take some steps to tackle this problem. I don't know if there's one that you want to highlight there, or I'll just leave it open for you to maybe kind of share some thoughts on how to achieve what the CEO is asking.
And that is a perfect sort of segue into how do we really recommend at the end of our research, how do we recommend that your software supply chain becomes more secure and you have more visibility into it? So take advantage, and this is, the cybersecurity teams out there, the software development teams out there, take advantage of the fact that the CEO understands the state of the software supply chain, understands that the software supply chain is a risk. So that's number one. Take advantage of the fact that the CEO understands this. Number two is know where your vulnerabilities are. And software is never going to be perfect. We know the vulnerabilities are going to continue to exist. Defects in software are going to continue to exist, but know where those vulnerabilities are and attach those to risk so you can understand which vulnerabilities you need to remediate right away versus which you can say, we can work around those. So, and then the third thing is really invest in this new modern types of technology, threat detection and response, exposure management, making sure that you have those technologies within your toolkit to be able to use effectively. And if you can't do those things yourself, work with a managed security service provider to be able to manage threat detection and response, manage your exposures, understand where your vulnerabilities exist, and through this technology. And then the fourth thing is to really work with those third-party suppliers that you're using. Make sure you're requesting verification and validation of their security credentials that they're using inside of their own software development. Understand where they're getting their source code from. Are they developing everything on their own, or are they going out and using yet again a third party, which becomes a fourth party to you? So those four things will really help you to be able to manage that software supply chain a little bit more effectively, give you some better insight, some better exposure to what's going on inside of your software supply chain, and deliver better business outcomes.
On that last point, Theresa, on the business outcomes, because I'm sure the team at LevelBlue is having conversations with many CEOs across many different sectors and many parts of the world. Is there a story perhaps you can share where an organization really took charge and took a handle of this scenario of supply chain risk management and security, and
Yeah, and the supply
achieve
chain
better
feeds
outcomes?
into
Yeah.
yeah, the supply chain feeds into everything you do. And as I mentioned at the beginning, LevelBlue, we provide managed security services, consulting services, as well as threat intelligence. And I can't name names, but we did have one of our clients who they were super smart cybersecurity people, and they kept saying to their leadership, to their C-suite, we need to do a little bit better. We're only two people. We're running everything. What happens if, one of us is gone? What happens on the weekends? We need to make sure that our uh, our business is really much better protected. We're running all these different pieces of software. An adversary can come in any way they may, and sure enough, it fell. The C-suite said, "You guys are doing a tremendous job. It's not in the budget right now. Just keep on doing what you're doing. We've been safe so far." And sure enough, it was a long holiday weekend. And the two people who ran the cybersecurity team, they were out for the long weekend. They went home on a Friday night. Everything was secure. And, their network was only being guarded Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 when they were there. Weekends, after hours, it wasn't being guarded. And the adversaries know this. The adversaries are also looking for any type of hole that they can come into, known vulnerabilities that exist in open source software, commercial off-the-shelf software. The cyber adversary is looking for a way in to be able to live inside of your network, move laterally, take whatever they want. So they come in after being gone for a long weekend. They were off Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They come in on Tuesday morning, and sure enough, they have found out that they have been a victim of ransomware. So at that point, cybersecurity moved from being a technical issue to being a business requirement. And they were able to then say, hey, we can bring in a managed security service company to help us manage and monitor 24/7, 365. We're never going to have any downtime when there's not somebody managing and monitoring what's going on. When there is some activity, when it looks as though some sort of adversary may be coming in to attack us, we're going to know because we're using LevelBlue to be able to manage this 24/7, 365. So, and it's unfortunate that in many cases, an incident such as that has to happen. But that goes back to the point that Marco made earlier, that cybersecurity is a culture. Cybersecurity is a business requirement. It's not a technical problem. It's a business requirement that everybody has to be a part of.
And I want to add to that as my closing point is that maybe it's also a societal wake-up call, because as it goes from technical to the business, it also goes to society. I mean, we're looking at infrastructure, we're looking at medical, pandemic, if we want to go there. I mean, the food T-shirt that Sean was wearing that normal shouldn't be wearing, but again, it's if you know where it comes from, then it can help prevent problem, not just in cybersecurity. So maybe on this we can kind of lead to have a different cultural or societal level as we are interacting with every part of the world, and there is no borders anymore when it comes to these kind of things.
Right. And you talk about ingredients. You talk about the ingredients of Sean's t-shirt. You talk about the ingredients of food. This is why the SBOM, the software bill of materials, is so critically important for organizations to understand that codified list or inventory of every piece of software, all the artifacts that you're using to make up that application or that system that you're building.
Yeah, and I'm inspired that the CEO has an understanding here
Mm-hmm.
of a
Yeah.
very, very technical element that clearly they recognize has a direct impact on the operational and business element. So
Right.
I'm
You're
inspired
right.
by
It's a
that.
technical element, but it is a business element. It's
Yep,
business critical.
yep, absolutely. Well, Teresa, it's always a fantastic chat with you. Always insightful and a lot of good advice here for organizations. I encourage everybody to read the Data Accelerator Software Supply Chain and Cybersecurity Report, part of the larger Futures Report series that LevelBlue puts together every year. We've had conversations about other sectors and other bits and pieces of the report, as well as the full report, and appreciate you sharing these stories with us. And Teresa, it's always good. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
And everybody do stay tuned for more brand stories here. And be sure to connect with Teresa and the LevelBlue team. We'll include links to the Data Accelerator we spoke to today and the LevelBlue uh, Futures Report as well. And of course, you can check out the directory for LevelBlue on ITSP Magazine for more conversations and more assets and resources. And we'll see everybody on the next one.